I'm Brad Staats from the Business School. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk with you all today. Thanks to Jill, Laura, and Caroline as well for kind of the yeoman's work to get all of this together. So my work looks at behavioral drivers of learning across different knowledge-intensive settings. So lots of interactions with folks in practice as we think about how can we implement practices to learn and improve. And today I want to talk about kind of one standard practice, that of process compliance. We can go back in time to the era of Frederick Taylor and shoveling coal. We can move forward to things like Toyota Production System, lean, and making cars, all the way through today, things like software or healthcare. And we see that when we have good processes that are followed, performance improves. It's more efficient, it's higher quality. Unfortunately, we know compliance is often the problem, even with those good processes. And so I want to take a look at one particular process that matters quite a bit, that of hand hygiene. So since the 1800s, we've had some good evidence to suggest the need for hand hygiene compliance, and yet all the way through to today, depending on which data you want to look at, we still hover around 50%. And so we here in this study take a look at the application of electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring has a benefit in that it's always on, right? We're able to monitor, we're able to measure, and then we can respond as managers. So here we take a look at an interesting application of this across over 70 hospital units spread across those 40 plus hospitals themselves, of putting RFID badges on workers, putting monitors across hospital units, as well as the hand hygiene dispensers. We're going to leverage that 20 million set of observations as well as over 5,000 caregivers in order to try to understand three questions. One, the overall implementation effect. Two, what happens over time. Here we're able to look at this over 2.5 years, more than that. And three, what happens if it gets taken away, if it's terminated. We can start with the first question, and this is just a simple summary statistics. The nice thing is it passes the eye test. We can run all sorts of more sophisticated models at it as well, but we see overall there's a pretty significant and dramatic impact of turning on electronic monitoring. So folks do, in fact, start being more compliant with the process, washing their hands. What's interesting, though, is that if I were to show kind of the bar graph of all the different effects, you'd see it varies pretty dramatically. And so we can start to unpack what's going on there. One of the big drivers we see of that difference is your precondition. Where did you start? And so here we actually find that the rich get richer. Those that were already higher compliers actually get more benefit from this, which I think is consistent with what we've seen across the morning as we've talked about the need for good practices, the need for good management in order for implementation to work. The second thing that we look at is the effect over time. So this is one of the unique parts of the study, is that we can track this for several years. What we find is that while performance initially goes up, initially this is looking at just the compliance, the 1-0, did you wash your hands, right? That kind of bell going off on the far side. And what we actually see is that at first people are building good habits, but over time it flattens out and eventually turns over. After about 2.5 years it turns over. Now again we can unpack this because there's variability. What I'm showing here is some regression output, but again, we can slice it a lot of different ways and see the same basic pattern. But we can look at things like leadership behavior, things like goals, competitions, and all of those can have some small effects. Far and away, the dominant effect, though, is having actively engaged leadership. When leadership are out in front of this, when leadership are making it clear that it's a priority to them, then we see this effect holds on, that kind of view pushes out or even doesn't show up in the data. It's a good reminder that even something as simple as electronic monitoring is not a fire and forget technology. Third thing that we can look at is 9 of our hospital units actually turn it off. What's quite compelling with this setup, though, is that the system continues to transmit data. And so we're able to see what happens post-termination. Now, there's lots of kind of theory we could turn to make an argument, but for now, let's just look at the simple results. That dark blue line is capturing all compliance behavior. More going on here with badge behavior, of course, goes to 0 because the badges go away, and light blue is the unbadged. But the key thing is that total use drops. It actually drops below where the different hospital units started. And so if we think about a mandate of first do no harm, it's an important reminder as we do implementation science of the real risks of putting something in place and taking it away and having things turn out worse than they were before. So happy to talk about any of this with folks more, but thank you very much.